Hello, BookTube. All right, we're on the 12K Q&A. I think we're in part 5, and we're going strong here. We're just going to blast ahead here. Toastwig says, I'd like to get into reading more history nonfiction, but I'm overwhelmed by choice and how to evaluate the validity of each book. I know there's a dodgy history out there. How do I get better at judging a history book's interpretations and sources without having to read everything under the sun? I am mortal. It's a gradual process. Don't beat yourself up. Don't lay too much work on your own shoulders. If you're new to reading a subject in nonfiction, it's not your job to vet the sources in 10 different languages. It's the author's job to do that. So you read that book for all of the book, not just the veracity of the sources or the reliability of the account, but also the writing, the characterization, the pacing, all the stuff that you would read not fiction for. You read that book, and then if you're interested in that subject, whatever it is, whether it's Napoleon Bonaparte or, the Battle of Lexington and Concord or whatever it is, if you're interested in that subject, you can read another book without thinking that the first book is Holy Writ. In other words, approach the second book with the same kind of thoughts in mind, and you will find gradually that the more you come to know the subject, the better you'll be at sifting how reliable a job the author is doing. You'll know right away. Once you've read enough books on the subject, you'll know right away whether it's a shallow cut and paste job or whether or not it's original writing. It's a gradual thing, though. There's no way to do it right away. My advice is always pick a subject that already interests you. Read the overview and all the associated articles on Wikipedia, just to get the lay of the land. And then read a book, and then read another book on the same thing, and then a third book on the same thing. And eventually, you will come to know the subject, and you won't have to worry about it so much. Jonas Zanzibar says, what do you think about Penguin's Monarch series? I like it. They're pretty good. What do you think about the movie adaptations of Stephen King's works like Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, The Shining, etc.? I mostly hate them. They're mostly terrible. Medium John Silver says, question, do you have a favorite Superboy story? I do, yes. Pete S. says, congrats. My wife, who is not familiar with BookTube, thinks that you and Scott Bradfield are the same person. Thoughts? No, we're not the same person. I can see where you might think that, but we're not the same person. I'm considerably funnier. Luke and Jennifer Higgins say, hi, Steve. Our sympathies for reaching 12K. A couple of questions to answer, please. Number one, what is your favorite literary rivalry? I don't have a favorite literary rivalry. Also, did Vidal and Mailer despise each other as much as what was presented on the Dick Cavett show, or do you think they were mucking it up for the camera? No, they hated each other. Mailer was easy to hate. He was easy to hate. Show me a person who watches a YouTube video of those infamous Dick Cavett moments, who comes out saying, well, they were arguing with each other, but I kind of like this Mailer guy. He was easy to hate. Right to the end of his life, he was easy to hate. And number two, Amelia, well, hello, Amelia, would like to know if you were part of any clubs growing up, 4-H, Boy Scouts, etc. Her dad is suspicious that you were a member of the Baker Street Irregulars. No, I was not a member of any clubs growing up, and I bet you can guess why. Dogs are the reason why. My dogs never left me, and they only listened to me. And they didn't listen to anyone else. They didn't care what other humans thought, so they were, as other humans would have seen them, unruly. And that never works. Boy Scouts go out on hikes. They go out looking for cauliflower or truffles or whatever. My dogs were always swarming around me. It's the same reason I was not very popular for team sports out on fields, because my dogs would be on the field running around all the time thinking I was playing with them. And it's also why I was never invited to play board games, because board games have all those little pieces, and dogs like to eat those little pieces. And I was inseparable from dogs. There was no circumstance in which I was doing something and there weren't a crowd of beagles with their tails up in the air. So I was not welcome at those clubs, unfortunately. Robert White says, first, congratulations on your success with the channel, and apologies for the lack of brevity. Now my question. You've gone through a lot of tablets this year. I have indeed. Yoga, Samsung, iPad. Before I drop $200, $500 for a tablet, can you do a video of the pluses and minuses experience with each? My first thought was to go cheap, but don't want buyer's remorse down the road. Is any model better for e-reading? That's a great idea for a video. I'll have to do a video on that. Although it's, again, going to come down to you. I use an iPad now for all of my e-reading. I have the Kobo app on it. I have the Kindle app on it. I have the Nook, the Barnes & Noble Nook app on it. It has an iBooks app already built on it. I filled all of those apps with books, and I like it best because the iPad allows me to jump from a book to cross-referencing something online. Plenty of people like e-reading that doesn't do that, specifically because they would get distracted. But I should do a video on the whole thing. KMM says, really enjoying the library tour and the Kindle lurks. However, my wallet and sanity may think differently. Too many books wanted, and many of the old lurking Kindle finds are no longer available. Yeah, I noticed that. A lot of people told me that they're either not available or they're not available with that cover. Question, are you making piles of the books that need to move as you go, since many seem to belong somewhere else? Or will they have to be a major room empty again this year to tidy it all up? No, I'm making piles as I go along for stuff that needs to be moved and for stuff that needs to get out of Hyde Cottage. Nose Army says, you often mention your love for debut novels. Do you find yourself being more lenient with first-time novelists? If so, what are some of the things that you might accept from them that wouldn't fly with more experienced authors? It's not that the things are acceptable, but I am a little more lenient because they don't know any better. They should know any better, but 21st century debut novelists have never read anything. It's not just that they've never written anything, they've never read anything either. They've never been made to read Henry James or Edith Wharton or William Shakespeare or anything like that. They don't know anything. They're the first generation of writers who don't come from a background of reading. They don't even have the vicarious experience of seeing authors make mistakes. So I will grant them a little leniency in making mistakes because they haven't figured it out for themselves. But it doesn't mean that the things are wrong or any less wrong. The things are still wrong. I'll still call them on it. But I don't have the angry edge that I would have with an established author who ought to know better. Anthony Suppa says, congrats on 12K. I don't have any doubt whatsoever that this day would soon arrive. Here's my question. What are your thoughts on the Pulitzer Prize? Is it a reliable prize in acknowledging a book's quality? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. See you again at 13K. You're not going to see me at 13K. But no, the Pulitzer Prize in the 21st century, it's absolutely not an accurate barometer of a book's quality. It's almost entirely judged by Twitter politics. So it has almost nothing to do with the quality of the book. You want to know about the quality of a book? Feel free to email me. Thomas says, hi, Steve. Do you ever see yourself self-publishing a novel or perhaps a book of history or biography? I wanted to publish a book in 2020, 2021, and now 2022. Just never managed. There's a lot of it that's tedium, and I never managed to find the time to make myself be bored with tedium. And I should. Or I should pay somebody to do it. Mike Crease says, onward to 13,000 subscribers. I can't wait for 20,000. Maybe you could end up on Joe Rogan or something. That day is not going to come. No. But besides, why would he want to talk to me? He already knows everything. Stoners, I tell you. Anyway, besides the brandy, old fashions, and squeaky cheese curds, what was your favorite part of Wisconsin? I don't know that I had a favorite part. I trekked all over the wild parts of Wisconsin with a bunch of dogs. I guess that would count, but that doesn't help you any. Below you will find my 15,000 treatise on defending dude bro literature and Taco Bell. Please respond as soon as possible. I don't know that I would read a 15,000 word piece on dude bro lit unless I wrote it. Declan Steger says, not a book question, Steve, but how, in your opinion, does Russia's invasion of Crimea in 2014 and now maybe 2022 Ukraine mirror German invasion of Poland and the Netherlands, etc.? Has the drop in U.S. global standing contributed to this? The drop in U.S. global standing certainly hasn't helped. Absolutely. But it is largely the same. In both cases, the aggressor is reading the will of the Western powers. Not their military capabilities, but their will. Will they respond if I take the initiative? Or will they dither? And in the case of Russia today, I'm watching the news every day to see whether or not this story breaks. P. Kenny says, congratulations, Steve. Do you have favorite books about the old Grand Tour, and what European places would you recommend for a modern incarnation? There were a couple of books. There have been a bunch of books on the old style Grand Tour that I've liked. There are books that covered in different centuries. It's taken slightly different forms in different centuries. But as far as a modern incarnation, first of all, you'd be crazy to travel. But if you want to do that, the modern incarnation that I always advise, you will be thankful later If when you go someplace, you just go to one or two places and stay a while, rather than trying to cram in a million places that you're not going to remember and that are going to blur together. Whenever in the old days before the pandemic, when Americans that I knew said they were going on a 5-city tour of Italy for a week, I always told them, don't do it. Don't do it. Go to one city and stay there for the whole week. I know it's natural to think you're never going to get a chance to go back, but what difference does it make if you go if you don't remember it? I would say I always did that myself. I went and stayed for a while. James McGarry says, congratulations on 12K. I have watched so many of your Q&As over the past year and really enjoyed them. I have two questions for you. What do you think is the best fiction writer to come out of Ireland in the past 10 years? The past 10 years? I don't know. I don't think I know. And also, what are your views on Edna O'Brien? I'm not a big fan. Long story. Jenny Park says, hi, Steve and Frida. I currently have 1,400 unread books on my Kindle, and I've been told this is too many and to stop buying. Should I listen to others and slow down getting new books? No, you shouldn't. Buy as many as you like. Harfoot Followhide says, congrats on growing your new empire. May it live long and prosper. As a question, the only question that really matters, what's your favorite star? Wars, Trek, Gate, or Search? Star Trek. But also on a sad note, Barnes & Noble is closing the Route 1 Saugus location. The Saugus store is closing? OMG. Oh, when is I didn't even know that was announced. Oh my, that's terrible. Hamilton Thompson says, what stirred your penchant for John Philip Sousa marches and the music of the Baroque? They don't ask too many nosy questions of me. They don't require me to stroke my chin and read a manifesto. They're just lovely to listen to. I've read that when Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring premiered, the ensuing music was so alien the audience went crazy. Yeah, threw chairs. I took advantage of the mob scene to throw a chair at Deb, even though the music wasn't bothering me. What's your feelings about the brain benefits of listening to new, unfamiliar genres of music? Well, it might benefit other people. I know what I like, and I like what I know. Culture Fan says, hi, Steve. Happy New Year. Your videos are still as interesting, entertaining, and informative as ever. Well, that was never a high bar to cross, now was it? I wondered what your thoughts are on Stan Lee bio memoir, True Believer, by Abraham Reisman. I kind of liked it. I'm still waiting for the Stan Lee biography that feels perfect. Maybe I'll never get one. Surprise, Paramount hired you in charge of a new Star Trek series. What direction would you want to take it? I would want to make it true to Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek. There's nothing dude bro or neckbeard or revanchist about that. It was a very good vision. It was worthwhile. It sustained 4 franchises of Star Trek. I would go back to that. All of current Star Trek has abandoned that vision of a better, kinder, more enlightened world that was full of curiosity about the larger universe. All of modern Star Trek has abandoned that view. I would like to go back to it. If I had command over a new Star Trek incarnation, that's what I would do. I don't think I would go back in time, in the timeline. Mine would still be set in the 24th century, but I would go back to those ideals, very much so. And I obviously also wouldn't have an all-female cast. That is just as bigoted and sexist as having an all-male cast. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't pander to Twitter politics. Anyway, Candace Uri says, howdy, Steve. I apologize for sneaking in a specific book question. Was Blaise Pascal's Pensée, as a former boyfriend called it, I can't say that on camera now, can I? Part of your Penguin overview. I know it's a philosophical text, but since you read everything, I'm sure you have an opinion. Well, it wasn't part of my Penguin overview because I don't have a copy of the book. I don't particularly want one either. It was pretentious and bloated. Jim Chaplin says, 12K, when will you be announcing your boxing match with Logan Paul? There maybe are a couple of other things I would do with Logan Paul stripped to his waist before boxing. A couple come to mind. I'd like to get the date on my diary. Boxing's a silly way to fight. And I don't fight for play anyway, so you can spare your calendar. If I had access to Logan Paul, the first thing I would want to do would not be box. Probably would be talk. Riley Johnson says, bookshelves, what are you buying? I don't understand the question. My bookshelves are not sentient. They cannot buy anything. Olive McQueen says, sorry, Steve, one more question. What, in your opinion, is the best, worst book to win the Booker Prize? I don't keep a list of the winners, good or bad. on the top of my head. Certainly one of the best is Wolf Hall. If you haven't read Wolf Hall, it deserves the hype that it has, so you should read it. Olive McQueen has a block of questions that extends to 1,000 words. I thought we covered this. Number one, I am a huge fan and watch your videos regularly here in Ireland. I really enjoyed your discussion and love how you differ from the majority of booktubers in that you seem to actually read the books you talk about. I do indeed read the books I talk about. I don't read short form or Blinkist versions of the books that I talk about. I read the books themselves. Number one, as someone who really enjoys commercial mystery fiction such as John Connolly, Tana French, Michael Connolly, Harlan Coben, I am wondering if you could recommend a mystery author that you think is very talented but doesn't get nearly the attention that he or she deserves. Oh, God, I do. I recommend books like that all the time. More than I could narrow down in one question. Just go to stevedonoghue.com and look at there's a long backlist there, 30 years of my best of lists. The lists I do at the end of every year, the best and worst books of that year. And there's a mystery category that goes back 30 years. You'll get a ton of recommendations there. Number two, can you explain why in recent times there has been a noticeable shift in general literary fiction from story to what I consider narcissistic nonfiction? What I mean is authors basically telling their life stories. Well, yeah, they're encouraged to do that. And they don't know anything else. Social media is the pool of Narcissus. It's infinitely solipsistic. You go to Twitter in order to look at yourself. You go to Twitter in order to have or Instagram in order to have your world reflected back at you. Hence the whole fight for representation in fiction and on the big screen. It's not demographic. It's that the people who are fighting for that want to see themselves in those stories, because then it'll be interesting. And by extension, if they're not in it, it's not interesting, no matter how well it's done. That is why you see all this auto fiction, because these people don't know how to do anything else. They can't think about anything other than themselves. One of the most noxious after effects of social media, I would say. Number three, my final question is a prediction question. The biggest selling authors of the last 10 to 15 years that appear on the airport bookshop shelves have remained the same. Stephen King, John Grisham, Lee Child, etc. Would you be able to, at this stage, which authors will be well-known names in the future? No idea. No idea. It all depends on momentum, and I don't know it well enough to know where the momentum is. Derek Monroe says, I don't know why my comments keep vanishing. I asked a normal question and didn't put in any swearing. Well, we've seen swearing already, so I don't know why they vanish either. Number one, are you aware of the website Does the Dog Die, which warns people if a book, TV show, or movie has a dog die in it? No, I did not know that. Number two, as a dog lover, what is your opinion of this website? Well, I don't know about the website, but I hate it. I'm against trigger warnings or content warnings of any kind. I'm against warnings like that of any kind. If you need those warnings, then just admit to me and to everyone else that you don't belong outside of the effing nursery. But don't impose that on things. Don't impose that on the rest of the world. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So I don't like the website, even though I've never seen it. And number three, do you agree with that some fiction uses killing dogs and other animals as a cheap trick in order to emotionally manipulate its audience? Yes, and not just dogs and other animals, but humans as well. I always think about, in the action thrillers, there's always a prerequisite slaughtering of a whole platoon of agents or a whole bunch of civilians. I always think about that. That imagine that's your way of goosing up your audience's interest, is to kill people. Let's see here. Shelf Life asks, what are your thoughts on Olga Tokarczuk? I like her. I thought Books of Jacob was good. Delir B says, my deep condolences on 12K. Number one, correct me if I'm wrong, and there's a good chance that I am, but I remember you mentioning Mahler as an example of dude bro music. Yes, indeed. If we're going to call it dude bro music, in his case, I would probably call it snob music. Could you please elaborate on why you think so? It's not interesting to listen to. It's torture, and it's meant to be. Same thing with atonal garbage. It's meant so that you can stroke your chin and lord it over people who don't like it as inferior to you. Anyway, number two, you have expressed your distaste for required readings of literature in educational institutions. What are some better ways, in your opinion, to design the curriculum that could get students to actually be interested in literature? I know this is going to sound like I'm playing to the gallery here, but get them to read about literature. Get them to analyze essays about literature, book reviews, author profiles, things like that. Most especially things that are not long. Don't give a teenager a 300-page book to read. You'll make them hate reading and lie to you about whether or not they read the book. Instead, give them shorter things. And teach them, instead of teaching them to like your curriculum of specific books, teach them to like reading, to like the adventure, the exercise of reading. If you get them to like that, they'll go out and read. It's not the books that will do that. It's the exercise itself. And that's easy to do. Just get them involved. Let's see here. And number 3, thoughts on the critic Edmund Wilson. I like him. Almost all of what he wrote. Richard Schwartz says, it's gotten to the point where I am reading another book every 2 days or 3 days. Is there anything that can be done for this condition? Yes, I think if you ignored your loved ones, you'd probably get up to 4 or 5. Why stop at 3? Chris T says, why have you never been to Australia? Mere happenstance. What is your favorite Australian book? I don't have just one. I don't know the works enough to have just one favorite. Have you ever read David Marr's House brick-sized biography of Patrick White? No, I have not. I don't think I know Patrick White well enough to get a lot out of that biography unless it's entertaining on its own. When you lived in other countries, how many times have you got rid of nearly all of your library to move? I never brought my library with me. I brought the same little collection of books with me everywhere I went, and I never added to it. I only replaced volumes that had been destroyed or eaten by a porcupine, but I never added new books. I never went into bookstores or libraries when I was traveling. I went into libraries, but only to read, not to borrow books. So I never had to the library stayed at home. You mentioned your appreciation of Quentin Crisp. Do you agree with his opinion on never doing any housework? Well, I don't do any housework. I don't particularly know his opinion off the top of my head. Who are some film critics you enjoy reading? The stereotypical answer here is Pauline Kael. She is great. Her big books, 1001 Nights at the Movies or I Lost It at the Movies, these are worth you finding and reading. She's really good. Modern film critics, I don't know that I have one. The best film critic to work in the last 50 years does not currently write movie criticism, does not currently write anything. If he returns to the fold, he'll be my answer. Oscar Mendoza says, do you think it's possible to read all the Western canon, or at least read enough to be considered well-read in the canon by those of us who read only 50 to 100 books a year? Would that reading list be 500, 1,000, 5,000 books long? I ask because there's a consensus among younger readers that it's impossible, but you seem to have done it. It is not impossible at all. And it's not 50 to 100 books a year. Okay, but how short are some of those books? Right? It would take you an afternoon to read the Gospels. Gospels have had an enormous effect on Western literature for 2,000 years. It would take you an afternoon to read all of them. It would take you probably the balance of a full weekend to read all the plays that we currently have by Euripides or Sophocles, and that would all be done. You'd have read them just recently as a fully grown adult, and you would have them. Some of those canonical works are long, but not all of them. You could certainly do it. I might reference my Western Canon Starter Kit. Those videos will encourage you. You can certainly do this. It is definitely possible. And it should be done. And you should do it outside of an academic setting. Do it on your own so you don't have a teacher droning in your ear. Patricia says, congrats on a well-deserved 12K. Questions. Have you ever read any Brazilian literature? Yes, I have. If so, what was it, and what did you think of it? I've read a lot of Brazilian literature. What do you think of reading celebrities' recommendations type of videos? Jack Edwards type videos. Or if celebrity lies about reading a book, he'll go out and read it. I read their book just to see what it was like. I'm going to make a whole bunch of fake self-deprecating comments with my 5 pounds of hair pomade. They're ridiculous. If you make reading into a video game, it shows what you think reading is. What American classics do you consider to be overrated, if any? That's a video on its own. There are a couple of answers here that I actually can't say. In the 21st century on YouTube, I actually can't say them. I would be canceled. And that's why I think they're overrated, because they're overrated for virtue signaling reasons. But I can't say them. I can't even mention the names. Bass Van Dyke says, number 1, what are your thoughts on American Psycho? Dude bro garbage or worthwhile? It's not garbage, but it's quintessential dude bro. All dude bros love. Patrick Bateman, a vicious, bloodletting psychopath. They all love him. They all think he's great. They all want to be him in some way or other. They won't come right out and say it because that would be cause for them to be fired for psych reasons at their job if you want to be a psycho. But they all love him. They all think he's great. His iconography is all over their rooms. The book is, it's bad. The author can be good, but American Psycho is largely bad. And number 2, what are your thoughts on the movies of Orson Welles? Do you have a favorite? I don't have a favorite, but I like them. I like a lot of them. Secular Perspective says the 300 Fabii have fell, save Quintus Fabius Vibulanus, who urged his fellow Romans to subscribe to Steve Donoghue. Yes, my 300 failed. My question for you is, have you read and enjoyed anything by Newt Hampson? Have I read Newt Hampson? That's your question. I have, yes, and I've enjoyed some of it. What do you think I do with my time? Joanna Burgess, congratulations for exceeding 12 nay subscribers. I found your channel 6 months ago and have been enjoying every video, including rants. My question, what is dude bro? You use that term quite often, and I hadn't heard the term until I heard you use it. It's a particular kind of reading, some may even say a particular kind of worldview, that is deeply misogynistic, deeply sexist, and largely concerned when it comes to books with getting a dopamine hit from a book rather than enjoying it as a work of writing, plotting or pacing or character or anything like that. It's mainly the dopamine hit that they want. Is this doing it? Is this doing what I want writing to do? Just stimulate those centers. Are the sentences short enough? Is there a moment on a regular basis where a man enforces his will by force? A whole bunch of things. It's a long laundry list. I know it when I see it. That's for sure. Tornado Creator says, I learned to read and developed a love for narrative fiction from playing old video games, mainly RPGs. I feel this has directly enhanced my love of reading. That's interesting. What, if anything, is your experience of video games? I have only played them glancingly, not at all. And how do you feel video games narratives compare with narrative fiction in literature? I would say deficiently. You obviously have a different opinion, but I would say deficiently. A video game narrative is not wide open. Your interpretations of it even aren't wide open. Thanks to the very nature of the thing, there are preset responses, preset patterns, preset paths where the narrative can go. You might think that would be true of a book that's written on paper. It's obviously not changing. But a book is open to infinite kinds of interpretation. And I've never thought that a video game was. Do you feel that the young medium of video games could achieve a breadth that literature has given enough time? Well, I don't see how. Because someone has to program the video game. And despite what I've heard video game fans say over the years, that is not the same thing as someone writing a book. But I'll be interested in watching to see. Claire Shepard said, just shows there are 12K people out there that enjoy intelligent discussion of books, a laugh, stories about the weather in Boston, interspersed with the occasional heartfelt rant. All is delivered with the absence of cant. Who could resist it? I am mystified. Matt Crash says, congratulations on 12K. Question number 1. If there were 2 famous figures from history that you could sit down and have dinner with, who would they be? Well, these questions don't work for me because I've known figures in history, and I would want them back just because I missed them. It wouldn't have anything to do with their fascination in the historical timeline, so it doesn't really work. And question number 2, how is it that Christopher Hitchens, a self-proclaimed lifelong Marxist, endorsed the Bush Doctrine? Did something really warp his mind, or was he a grifter? Grifting is probably a little too shallow for what he did. He realized that a contrarian pose. I mean, the Bush Doctrine was universally condemned instantly, except by the bootlicking Bush apparatchiks who were also in their spare time writing legal documents justifying torture. Americans torturing people in the name of the law. Aside from those people, the Bush Doctrine, as you call it here, was universally condemned from the first minute. And Hitchens hated that. He wanted to be out of lockstep with that kind of group thinking, even if that kind of group thinking was right. he still wanted, it was just a thing he couldn't resist. I don't know if that's the same thing as grifting, although he made a lot of money off it. He also lost a lot of friends, so it's the price to be paid. Jordan Parsons says, do you think Stephen Ambrose is worth reading, or is he as unscrupulous an historian as I've heard? He could be a little unscrupulous, but he is very much worth reading. We can't hold a couple of ethical or even work product lapses against the guy's whole body of work. He's still worth reading, I think. Scott Phillips says, did you ever visit acres of books in Long Beach, California? I did. If so, I wonder your thoughts on that great musty old warehouse of used books and how you would say it compared to the Brattle. I liked it a lot. Of course, the Brattle has first place in my heart, but I enjoyed it very much. I was sorry to hear that it went out of business. Drunzo says, don't worry, Steve, the 300 may have fallen, but we shall be victorious at Salamis against the incoming forces of King 13 Nay himself. I hope so. I hope so. First question, will there be any starter kits in 2022? Yes, there will be. If so, I would formally throw my hat in the ring for one on the Reformation. Well, that's because you're a nerd. But I've had some actual good suggestions, too. One on humor, one on travel writing, those sorts of things. Arthurian writings, those I would probably put ahead of the Reformation. Oh, my God. The second question, it's a bit long-winded, but boils down to a yes or no. In your Daily Penguin for Ovid, you mentioned in regard to how much of Ovid's work was extant, that there's a rumor that he learned the language of his exile and wrote an epic in that language. Now, and this is purely hypothetical, if that rumor was true, and you had the entirety of the poem, and scholars had also cracked the code of that language such that it could be learned, would you go through the process of teaching yourself that language such that you could read the last epic poem of your favorite author in the original? You're assuming I don't already know that language. Keep in mind that along with other candidates for a scholarly debate about where I was born, one strong candidate is that I was born on the shores of the Black Sea in what is now known as Turkey, and which would be, coincidentally, no more than 100 meters from where Ovid was exiled. I might know that language. I might have a copy of that book. No, but I would definitely want to read the thing. I would do whatever I could to read it. Chris Day said, how are we doing for time? Oh my God. All right, we're going to stop. We'll come back to part 6.